This video will cover some background to scientific realism. We basically just need two things: some basic concepts from philosophy of language, and a little bit of a discussion about the principle of bivalence and how philosophers have thought about it. There is a handout that goes along with this video, so if you want to take a moment to hit pause and download that handout so you can follow along, that's great. The first thing we want to discuss is how it is that we can specify the meaning of a general term such as the term planets. And philosophers have long said that there's basically two meanings of meaning. Okay, so a general term is just a word or sequence of words in our language that denotes a class or category of things. And what we want to ask is, what does the term planet mean? Now, there are two clear ways to answer this question. We might say, for example, that by the term planet, what we mean is something like a massive body that does not emit light and that orbits a star. And when we do that, we are giving a kind of definition of the term planet as if we were making a checklist of all the features that an object has to have in order to be a planet. Okay? So it has to be a massive body, it doesn't emit light, and it orbits a star. Now, of course, you might have a more precise definition if you're an astronomer, but for now, you get the general idea, right? That to give a stipulation of meaning, or to answer the question, what does the term planet mean, you can do it by listing a set of characteristics, which, if you check them off, would mean that you're looking at an example of a planet. But there is another way to answer that question. When we ask the question, what does the term planet mean? You could say that planet means one of the members of this set here, right? Maybe Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, or whatever. So a different way of specifying the meaning of a general term is to list all of the things in the universe that are examples, or as philosophers say, instances of that term. So let's give some labels to these ways of specifying meaning. The first label we want to introduce is the concept of the intension of a term. We say that the intension of a term is the list of characteristics shared by all and only the objects that are correctly called by that term. So in our example, the term was the term planet, and we saw what the list of characteristics was. Okay? So you'll see in philosophical discussions of language that the intention of a term is also sometimes called the connotation of the term or the sense of the term. Okay? And these are going to have counterparts when we talk about the second way in which we specify meaning. So the second way we specify meaning is by gathering up all of the things that are labeled correctly according to that term into an abstract collection that we call a set. So we say that the extension of a term T is the set of all things that are correctly called T. And again, the term that we were looking at was the term planet. And so the extension of the term T, of the term planet in our case, would be the set of all planets. So now, the extension of a term is also called the denotation or the reference of the term. Using that kind of language, we can see that a term can have sense but fail to have reference. And what you'll notice in philosophical discussions of language is that sense is contrasted with reference. Intention with an S is contrasted with extension. And connotation is contrasted with denotation. And we try to keep these pairings consistent when we talk about language. So that's why I said a term may have a sense but no reference, because we usually group those two terms together. Okay? So the example of a term that has sense but no reference is the term unicorn, because the sense of that term, or its connotation or intention, is maybe something like this: a white horse-like animal with a spiral horn. And its denotation, or its extension, or its reference, is the empty set. And you can see how this kind of way of talking about language can help our discussions of scientific realism, because instead of asking about the term unicorn, we could have asked about the term electron. And we might have said, if we were scientific anti-realists, that the term has a sense but no reference. Okay, and that's basically where we're going with this. But first, let's make sure that we understand that a term refers only if there are instances of it in the world. And so, for example, the term unicorn does not refer. If you're a scientific realist, then you think that the term electron does refer. Okay? And we're just very, very close to putting all this together into a contemporary characterization of scientific realism. But we need one more thing first. We need the concept of bivalence, which is just that you believe in bivalence if you believe that every meaningful statement in a particular area of discourse is determinately either true or false. Now, this phrase, determinately either true or false, just means that the statement definitely has one of two truth values, either T or F. So, for instance, if I think of a simple example, such as Plato was born on a Tuesday, if you believe that claims about the past are bivalent, what you believe about this statement is that it's definitely either true or false. It is definitely either true or false. That's not an epistemological claim. It's sort of almost like a metaphysical or ontological claim. It's to say that the statement has a truth value. We might not know its truth value, but that's a separate issue. Okay? There is a fact of the matter that fixes the truth value to be either T or F. So now, the question is, why would anybody deny the principle of bivalence, which states that every meaningful statement is determinately either true or false? And, in contemporary logic, it's more common to deny the principle of bivalence in a localized way. So that you say, in certain areas of discourse, we're going to reject the principle of bivalence, but we're going to accept it in other areas of discourse. But some of the considerations that have been raised by philosophers to question the principle of bivalence are the following. First, the fact that we have vague predicates, which we've already encountered in our discussions of von Frausten's constructive empiricism. For instance, the predicate "is green" is arguably a vague predicate. And you can imagine a situation where one could convincingly argue that the statement "the book is green" is neither true nor false. Okay, because it's just that shade of a color that isn't really obviously green or not green, right? And so vague predicates have motivated some philosophers to say that we need to deny the principle of bivalence. A second reason is statements such as this one: the elephant under the desk is white. And these statements are particularly tricky because they're hard to say whether it's true or false. And, people sometimes feel kind of strongly about this. But for instance, suppose I said right now, the elephant under my desk is white, and I promise you there's no white elephant under my desk. If the subject of the sentence, so to speak, has no referent, there's nothing in the world that is the elephant under my desk, then it's not clear what we should say about whether that statement is true or false. Some philosophers think we should say that it's false, but then other philosophers say, well, wait a minute, if you say that it's false, then what you're saying is that it's true that the elephant under the desk is not white. And if it's not white, then you should tell me what color it is. But you can't, because there's no elephant under the desk. So there's these little sort of subtleties about statements where what you're talking about does not have a reference. The last reason is a whole cluster of things called semantic paradoxes. This is just one example. Suppose I consider the sentence that says, "this sentence is false." And you say, well, suppose that sentence is true, then it's false. And if it's false, it's true. It's like, wait a minute, what? It can't be both true and false, right? Or can it? Is this a case where we should deny the principle of bivalence? Well, clearly what's going on in this case has something to do with self-reference, which is actually a very, very important notion in a variety of different areas of philosophy and mathematics. But for us, in our discussions about philosophy of science, it's not going to figure very prominently. So this is basically what we need to understand what we could call the Dummett-Putnam-Boyd characterization of realism. These are three philosophers, Dummett, Putnam, and Boyd. We've read Putnam. You're going to read Boyd and Putnam again. And we haven't read anything by Michael Dummett. But Putnam tells us that this is where he got it from, that he got it from Dummett. What Dummett said is that a realist, and notice the qualifier here in this one, with respect to a given theory or discourse. So we're already being more nuanced, right? We're not just talking about realism in general. We're talking about whether you're being a realist with respect to a certain area in which you use a certain kind of language consistently, okay? So a realist with respect to a given theory or discourse holds two things. First, if you're a realist about a particular theory or discourse, what you believe is that the sentences of that theory or discourse are true or false. And what that means is that you believe in bivalence. You believe that the statements in your theory are bivalent, that they must be determinately either true or false, okay? And the second thing that you believe, if you're a realist about some theory or discourse, is that what makes the statements true or false is something external, okay? This is a kind of loaded philosophical term, and Putnam tries to explain it. That is to say, it is not, in general, our sense data, actual or potential, or the structure of our minds, or language, or something. There's something outside of my mind that makes the statements that are meaningful in my theory or discourse definitely either true or false, even if I don't know their truth value. So you can see something very important here. This description is a description of realism, not a description of scientific realism, right? Because it's a description of realism with respect to any given theory or discourse. This is going to turn out to be very handy for us because we can use it, for instance, to talk about realism in ethics. To be an ethical realist is to be someone who believes that the sentences in ethics are determinately either true or false, even if we don't yet know their truth value. And that what makes them true or false is something external, typically something about the way the world is, whatever that means, okay? So this characterization of realism is very general and has scientific realism as only one of many special cases. So I hope you've enjoyed thinking a little bit about philosophy of language and one of these fundamental principles of logic that underwrites contemporary characterization of realism.